Now, boys will be boys and girls will be girls. Or will they? And more importantly, should they? This week, we learned that some schools in England have introduced a ban on skirts to reflect a gender-neutral policy on school uniforms. But some people say eliminating choice when it comes to uniform confuses children, while others believe embracing gender neutrality relieves the pressure of conforming to stereotypes. So our discussion today, should children be raised gender neutral? Joining us now to give us their views are writer for The Conservative Woman, Julie Lynn, from Eternity Church in Croydon, Pastor Clement Akuzi, actor Rebecca Root, and still with us, teacher and spoken word poet Jaspreet Kaur. Well, Julie, you're a former teacher. Do you see the benefits of giving girls and boys the same uniform?
No, not at all. We're not gender neutral, by and large. So, as far as I can see, denying girls the right to say something about their gender that they might want to say clearly and in an uncomplicated, swift way is wrong. I think there is a language to clothes. It's one that we speak and we understand. We can say all sorts of things about ourselves, about the way we dress. We can say, sorry.
Well, don't you mean you're not gender neutral? Some people are gender neutral.
If you feel you are gender neutral, you should have the choice of wearing a skirt or trousers. But to compel girls to wear trousers, I think, is not on, completely wrong. And as I was saying, the language of clothes, we can say all sorts of things about ourselves through the way we dress. We can say things about our allegiances as far as perhaps football, politics, how much money we've got, how much money we'd like to spend on clothes, our relationships with fashion, all sorts of things. And it seems to me completely wrong now that the one thing that we're going to say to girls, schoolgirls, that they cannot say about themselves is that they are a girl. And in our culture, a skirt has always been a swift and uncomplicated way of communicating that.
Rebecca, I mean, that's a fair point, isn't it? If we can't say girls are girls, this world has gone crazy, hasn't it?
Well, I'm wearing jeans. Jaspreet is wearing a lovely trouser suit. I think Sherry's wearing trousers. I mean, you know, you say skirts denote gender, but I mean, what makes, you know, any of us who are wearing trousers any less of a female than somebody like yourself who's wearing a skirt?
I didn't mean that. I mean, there should be a choice.
But yeah, you chose to wear trousers. Everybody chose to wear trousers. He's wearing trousers today. But what if you ban the skirt? I mean, that's a different thing, isn't it? Choice and the ban, a completely different argument.
By the same score, you could say, what about if everybody wore skirts? And, you know, a skirt is a piece of clothing by any other name. You could say a kilt is a skirt, or a long robe is a skirt, or a dress. It's just, it's semantics, isn't it, about an item of clothing?
No, but that point about the ban, if you ban girls from wearing a skirt, that's completely different to having choice. You're not giving them the choice. Isn't that the issue?
In the same way that I would suggest that if you are forcing girls to wear skirts, is that not simply compelling them to wear something that they may not wish to wear?
No, I think girls shouldn't be forced to wear skirts. Most schools now, the schools that I'm very familiar with in the area I live, give girls the option of wearing a skirt or trousers as part of their school uniform, and I think that's a great accommodation.
Pastor Clement, if you're confused about your gender, this is a good option, isn't it? It gives people the choice to be gender neutral.
Yeah, I think we need to maybe just dial this back a bit and go back to a very simplistic understanding. You are either XX or XY. There is no G chromosome. There is no genderless chromosome. You are biologically male or female.
What if you're intersex?
Hold on a second. That's a very tiny percentage of people.
It's still a percentage.
In broad brushstrokes, when a child is born, the doctors will very clearly identify your gender. This idea that we can choose our gender is a social and cultural construct. This is, as I was saying earlier on in the green room, this is a first world problem. Much of the world isn't talking about people choosing their genders. I accept there are some anomalies in tiny percentages, but the truth is there's only two types of chromosome, scientifically, genetically, and biologically. You can only be XX or XY.
But you're conflating gender and sex, or you know, so the sexual characteristics of male and female are not the same as gender constructs, which I accept, as man and woman or girl and boy.
Those cannot be gender neutral.
But in society, the point is, in society there are all sorts of limitations connected to gender, and that's what we're trying to get away from.
Okay.
Not the fact that you're born a boy or a girl.
Sure, OK, but this is where it goes to, and I accept that there are... I mean, I'm a father of girls and boys. And we teach our girls the world's their oyster. They can be whatever they want to be. And so we're not into putting particular limitations on them in terms of their career or what they can achieve, etc., etc. Well, then the way to address that problem is to challenge that. I don't think having banning particular types of school uniform or talking about gender neutral. I mean, I'm identified as a man. People are identified as females. We are identified as our gender, and I think the gender that we're born with is not something to be ashamed of or something to be confused about. And I'm not comfortable as a parent with our school trying to inform our children that they've got a choice about their gender and whether they're boys or girls.
Jaspreet, you've spent a year in a school teaching and campaigning to give girls the opportunity to wear the skirt or trousers.
Absolutely. I think this idea of 40 schools only allowing the students to have the choice of trousers is going the complete opposite direction of helping students who may be going through trans issues. It comes down, I do agree, to that element of choice. They should have the choice between trousers or skirts, both males and females, or for the students who are transitioning. I've been with students on the ground, up in classrooms, with children from the age of 11 to 18 who are going through this very confusing process, so we should not be forcing them to have to wear a piece of clothing. And the particular situation I was in was a girls' school where they were only allowed to wear skirts. And here I was running a feminist society and all these extracurricular activities to talk about female empowerment, to talk about body image and all these things they're going through, and they're coming to me and talking about that they're being forced to wear these skirts every day, which has been hypersexualized by patriarchy, by the male pornographic industry, and they don't feel safe wearing skirts, so they just want that option of wearing trousers. So depending on the individual, they need that choice. So just having trousers isn't actually solving it. And also, I just wanted to make a point about this isn't a first world problem. I think the narrative about trans issues or gender neutrality is something we've been convinced is a Western first world problem, but it's actually not. This is something that goes on in the Eastern world as well and has been happening for many civilizations.
Yeah, and that's a point we will come back to in just a moment. Let's get to Cherry now, because you're speaking to someone who's experienced this firsthand with their child.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sean. Joining me now is Roberta Borsotti, a parent who came across the opposite issue in her daughter's school, where trousers were banned for girls. Roberta, tell us what happened.
Yes, hi. Basically, my daughter is in a primary school in southwest London, and up until now, the school uniform did not allow girls to wear trousers. I think that's not acceptable in the 21st century. I don't think banning skirts or trousers is the solution moving forward, because that's not a sign of equality. So after fighting the school for nearly 3 years, I have decided to start a fundraising campaign to actually take this to the courts. I think many schools are taking a misguided approach based on the guidance the Department for Education has issued on school uniform policies. I don't believe this guidance is doing enough to cover equality, and it's not satisfactory in that respect.
Yes.
So I think it's time for a court to look at that and establish whether such inflexible school uniform policy based on gender are good guidance or not.
Why is it so important to you?
As a mother, well, it's just that I couldn't find, or I was never given, a valid, sensible reason for the ban.
Were the other parents on board? Were they behind you?
Many school parents are behind me, and the school in the end did a consultation among other parents to ask whether the option should be allowed for girls to wear trousers and skirts, and over 77% agreed. So I think the desire is there for that, but I think this is a matter of discrimination based on gender, and it's irrelevant if you discriminate one or many. This should be dealt with the equality laws that we have in place in the country.
Did anyone disagree with you? Did you face opposition?
Yeah, well, opposition not as such, but I came across some people that were not necessarily against having just skirts or just trousers policy. The main arguments that they were using were that it's a traditional thing. To me, tradition comes with two faces. One thing are traditional values, for example, like, family, community, honesty, respect. I really value this kind
Yes,
of beliefs.
Roberta, so actually, I'm just going to say the Department for Education have responded, and they say decisions about school uniform are made at a local level by school leaders who are best placed to ensure these policies meet the need of their pupils. But we would expect them to consult parents and pupils and ensure their policies comply with equality's law. Sean, what do you make of all that?
Well, I'm going to put that to Julie, actually. Children know best, don't they? Shouldn't we be following their lead?
Your parent, children.
No, but in terms of their feelings.
Of course, I think the ideal situation in school is to give children, you've got skirts and trousers, and girls can make up their own mind what they feel most comfortable in. But I do feel that there is a creeping ideology at play here, and this is what disturbs me, and I feel that somebody should not be compelled to present themselves as gender neutral if that is not how they feel. This is a kind of false speech, and I've talked about the language of clothes as a metaphor. This is very disturbing.
It's disturbing. It's an ideology, a creeping ideology. Rebecca, what do you make of that?
I accept that you have concerns, but if we try to look at this from the perspective of the person who is going through gender dysphoria and is deeply distressed and wrestling with their gender identity, as from my own experience, as I was when I was going through adolescence and before. But it's a very, to have a level playing field actually makes life much easier for that person because they don't feel like they're standing out. And,
so you mean trousers and nothing else? That trousers, no skirts, but level it out just with trousers.
And what about toilets? Do we have a gender-neutral toilet, male and female?
Well, why not? We have gender-neutral toilets in festivals.
And what about changing rooms? 13-year-old girls should
have
have
them at the Olympic swimming pool. You've got
should 13-year-old girls have to be comfortable sharing a changing room with 13-year-old boys who are transitioning to girls?
I would say the same.
Get over it?
I'll ask a cisgender person whether they don't feel self-conscious in a changing room as well.
Isn't the point here, though?
In the same sex.
Rebecca, is there the point here, and many people will be saying this at home, that there's a very small minority who are influencing everybody and making sure everybody has to go through, do what they want to go through?
Well, benefit for the few for the greater good.
I think this is where the lack of clarity is. I think when people are talking about gender-neutral schools and implementing some of these ideas, it's not the idea of just having gender-neutral toilets. It's the idea of having male toilets, female toilets, and the option of a gender-neutral toilet as well. I would support that. Which is what the argument is about. I think there's a lack of communication, a lack of clarity about what gender neutrality in schools actually looks like.
Just before we go to social media, who is in favour of a ban of skirts in schools? I mean, you said that you used the choice you want. Would you be in favour of a ban of skirts? So ban skirts in schools so everybody has to wear exactly the same.
Yeah, it takes to an extent it takes the trouble out of making that's the whole thing with the uniforms, school uniforms.
I think that's to deny a girl her fundamental right to declare that she is a girl, she's a young woman. There are plenty of parts of the world, regrettably, where women are told to be quiet, cover up and shut up. And I think that is wrong, really wrong and disturbing.
Let's find out what people are saying at home, Cherry.
Thank you, Sean. So Steve Andrews says, definitely not. Humans are either born male or female. It should not be the responsibility of schools to educate gender neutrality. Steph Mosley says, yes, gender is a completely unnecessary classification and is not about someone's biology or sexuality. Paula Wilcox says, I agree with bringing up children with gender-neutral clothes and toys, but I think this is going too far. And finally, Stacey Ann Hitchens says, I think kids should wear what they like. As long as they are happy, let kids be kids. Sean, strong opinions in the studio, but also at home.
Yeah, really interesting. The particular point about gender, I'm going to put this to you, Clement. Gender is a construct by us. It's not sexuality. There's a difference
gender neutrality, I think.
You're simplifying the whole thing here.
I've got 4 children, 3 daughters and a boy. They are very different. And I think we get a lot of who we are as human beings. I mean, I'm a Christian, so I take a lot of my teachings from Scripture. You know, one of the first parts of the Bible says that God made them male and female. And so part of my identity is my gender. You know, you can't separate the two. The idea, you know, I could know, in my mind, I could no more choose my gender than I could choose the colour of my skin, or the height, or how tall I am, or whatever. I understand, yeah. So it's because science has given us the ability to do that. In previous times, we didn't have the choice to do that. And so, no, and I think trying to talk to children, I mean, when I was that age, I wasn't even thinking about my gender. You know, growing pains is a lot different to confusion about agenda. A lot of children have growing pains.
With
Okay,
respect, you're one of the lucky
okay.
ones. You're one of the lucky ones. You know, you
Yeah.
didn't have that gender confusion.
Less than 2% of the country identify in that context. And so
Gender dysphoria.
I'm afraid
Yes.
we are going to have to leave it there. Thank
No
you
problem.
all very much
Thank you.
indeed.